It's 12:40. You're listening to the Mid-Morning Talk on Salam Media with me, Mari Mukwanda. All jobs have some level of stress, even on good days. However, if you're going to work or just the thought of going to work makes you tired, depressed, or even physically ill, that's more than just general work stress. These are the signs of a toxic work environment. How do you not let your toxic work environment affect your work? Let's find out with Clive Kaplin, the CEO of Green Mind Capital, with over 20 years' experience as an executive director in both listed and unlisted companies, as well as an executive coach. Good day, Clive, and thank you for joining me.
Mary, thank you very much for having me on your show. Nice to be with you.
Right. So, first of all, what qualifies as a toxic work environment?
I think just to opening to say that, in my view, most environments in the workplace are toxic as a general statement. But there are three particular sort of issues that come up around sort of the toxic environment. The first one is toxic leadership, okay, which is the one, to all intents and purposes, in the work that I do, I actually focus on that particular idea. The second thing is corruption and criminal activities, which creates a huge amount of toxicity, especially this is happening a lot in the government departments, had been over the last few years. And then finally, some more sort of colloquial stuff, which is bullying and teasing and minimizing and shaming. Okay, the type of work that I concentrate and focus on, Meryl, is really around the executive side of the toxic leadership, because the toxicity in the company, in my view, always comes from the top.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned that in fact I was going to come to the topic of bullying and shaming. Now, why do people feel reluctant to talk about the issues or to report bullying and harassment?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting question. In the context, I think people don't feel they would be supported if they, approached either their manager or HR to file a grievance around these particular issues. But I say at the sort of lower ends of sort of the sort of below manager level, the staff level, is not as prevalent as it is the further you get up to the top. So the closer you move up to the executive space, the more you're going to feel the kind of toxic sort of leadership coming through. Stuff that's happening at the sort of staff level, I think maybe sort of dealt with conflict resolution. And I think managers, in contradiction to myself, I think managers are open to hearing that kind of thing. But when one starts moving up, through the various levels, then it becomes, very, very difficult to confront it.
Mm-hmm. How do you manage an environment without letting it affect your work?
Well, the view is simply is that there are sort of three levels of one's career development. The first level is as a staff member moving into manager. The second level is actually moving from manager into executive. And there is a large gap between these two domains. And then finally, it's actually, existing in executive space. And this thing about the gap between the manager and the executive is really the big issue here. And in order to make them transition, and why I've put this incidentally, there is such a gap. There might be sort of textbook explanations like, executives are more strategic, managers are more day-to-day. But there are, really two very interesting reasons as to why there's such a difference. The first one being is that there is a certain type of personality that naturally bubbles up into these leadership spaces. So I call them me type people. Some people call them narcissists. Some even people call them corporate psychopaths. And we've had our share in this country in the last few years. Stanov particularly comes to mind. And the second reason is that the ethos in the executive space is very much a sort of, I come first, the company comes second, to the degree that it suits my share options and my bonus, and everything is a commodity for me to use and dispose of as I wish, including the people. Now, the manager domain is very different. The manager domain is where, the The ethos is more like the people come first, the company comes second, and I fit in somewhere behind that, not because I see myself as anything lesser, but because I have a more principle-based, value-based leadership style. So as I said earlier, you sort of the more you move down to the sort of lower levels in the corporate structure, you're less likely to be coming across this type of narcissistic, dominating personality, which can make one's life miserable. Just incidentally, just on the topic of bullying, okay, bullying is something almost impossible to deal with. I mean, I had a kid who was being bullied at school. As much as the teachers promised, to make a difference, there's pretty much nothing they can do about it. And it is a particularly horrifying thing that exists. That exists, pretty much all over, where people feel they can take advantage of somebody just because maybe they're weaker than, or they have something which is, out of the norm, either, the way they look, the clothes they wear, the way they speak. So that really is something which is not specific to the workplace. I think that sort of kind of happens everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Right, now let's go back to the beginning. What causes a toxic work environment?
Well, as I say, it always comes from the top. Okay?
Yeah.
And part of the whole process is, as I see it, is that it's simply because you have this sort of narcissistic personality, and because of the very nature of their personality, they tend to naturally move up into to leadership positions. And one of the acid tests around this, just incidentally, is an attitude of my way or the highway. But you do my way or the highway, that's the way it is. And the view that I have around it is that you cannot do anything about it. It's part of life in the corporate experience. And really what one needs to do is one needs to find a way to live with it and use it to your advantage. And that is really the main type of work that I do in my coaching, is to help people to exist constructively in this type of environment to further their careers.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that you mentioned that, I just realized that I've worked in toxic environments on multiple occasions, and I did not realize that. And only after I left, that's when I realized, hey, you know what? I feel much better as a person now, and I'm not around all that negativity and all of that my way or the highway type of attitude. And now going forward, I know where I want to be, and I don't want to be in such an environment. Now, there are other people who feel like there's nothing that they can do, because if they confront the boss, or if they leave, then they're going to be without a job, and it's going to affect their living. It's going to affect their children, etc. How can they work around that?
I mean, I don't think they can, quite honestly. If it is a series of basic bullying, at a personal level, and shaming, okay, I don't think there's very much they can do about it. It seems that what they need to have to do is to leave. I'm not too sure that HR is sensitive enough to these issues, because it could be deeper issues involved with the person, and are companies willing to put people through some sort of program where they have psychotherapy or something to deal with it, where they can learn and grow and develop themselves as human beings to actually counteract these particular issues that are happening. I'm not too sure how willing companies are to do that. Although that would be obviously the right solution, but in my view, there's pretty little. There's not much one can do. One would have to leave. And the other thing about it is, one cannot be guaranteed that by going to the next company, it's going to be any better. Just incidentally.
Same thing. Yeah. And then how do you manage a toxic employee?
Yeah. So it's interesting. You've raised this particular thing. If you have someone that's working for you that's toxic, okay, for all intents and purposes, what they're doing is they are taking power from you in some way. Okay? And really what it requires is to disempower them. Okay, probably using similar tactics to them. So what I normally do is I encourage my clients to deal with that particular person in a very simple way, is to withdraw from them and ignore them. Okay. And in the process, the dynamics that's created, because they are the boss, because you are the boss in the situation, okay, it creates some confusion around what is going on in terms of their job, and they start worrying, is it something that they did? And is it something that the company's looking, and are they looking at retrenching them or something? You want to create that confusion in that situation. Normally, a person who's toxic in the workplace is cunning enough to be able to manipulate the manager, into giving their power away, okay? And they control them in a certain way. And really, what you want to do is you want to break that control by swinging it around and sort of making it into a situation where they become uncertain about the situation and not as confident and secure as they think they are in the situation.
Mm-hmm. Right
So
now,
you should focus. Yeah, it
would it
works very
be
effectively, by the way.
what would be the ultimate solution, in a toxic work environment?
Yeah, Miriam, it's very interesting you ask that question, because there's no doubt in my mind is that this type of management style and toxicity in companies is actually on the way out. And I'm saying that because the type of leadership that we're talking about will not survive into the future for a number of reasons. And there's, in fact, a great move towards transparency, openness, integrity, ethics that is coming through in companies in a formal structure. And I think that the narcissistic type leader will not survive such an attack, and it's happening, quite fast at the moment. There's another thing that's really interesting, is this mass resignations. Okay, in my view, this mass resignations is almost to some degree a confirmation of some of the things that I'm saying. Is that I think people have been out of the workplace for a while now with COVID, and coming back into the workplace, they've just found this kind of oppressive management style, toxic experience, okay, absolutely intolerable. And they're resigning, they're just leaving. They don't want to have any part of it in the hope they can find somewhere else. It's not like it. I think it's this COVID, the separation of people from the workplace, okay, is highlighted this particular issue, and people are just saying they don't want it. So I think it is changing, but it's going to take a while still, I think.
But I'm glad it's changing, and I'm glad that people are starting to recognize that there is a problem here, and there's so much that needs to be done. So even if it takes a while, at least it has started.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing is, the driving force behind this, in my view, is really the emerging one, sort of the Z generation. Okay, the sort of new coming, sort of millennium generation that's coming through, are just not prepared to accept this. Okay, and if you're going to want talent, going forward, the management styles are going to need to change. Otherwise, people will not work for you. And I think it's going to be forced, and it's becoming, in my view, a big risk to companies and their businesses, that if they don't change their ways of managing people, they're going to lose out, economically in a big way.
Yeah, definitely. Now, quickly tell us about the services you offer.
As I work mainly with people who are looking to move, or you're finding themselves stuck in the manager space, they can't seem to find a way to go to the next level. And really, what's really going on here is that they're dealing in a narcissistic environment, and they're unable to understand the dynamics that are getting played out here. So there's undoubtedly in the corporate space there's a game going on. Okay, and really what I do is I just make my clients aware through a program, make my clients aware of how this game is playing out, so that they are sort of much more able to function. So there are two ways of playing the game. You can be this proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing, which is that charming, deceptive and deceitful narcissist, or you can be a sheep in wolf's clothing, okay, which is the other way around, which is to be able to retain your own level of your principles, your ethics, your integrity, but at the same time have, I call it, a sheep with teeth, to have the the wherewithal to actually hold your own in the executive space. That's the kind of work that I do.
All right. And how can our listeners contact you should they require your services?
The best thing to do is to go to my website, coach.greenmindcapital.co.za. Okay, and there's a contact form to fill out. Alternatively, they can WhatsApp me on the following number: 072 280 6878. 072 280 6878. Otherwise, they can contact me either via LinkedIn. I'm very, very vocal on LinkedIn.
All right. And any last words, takeaway points?
Yeah, I think, so I'm going to say this again. Toxicity in the workplace comes from the top always. It doesn't come in at the middle. Okay, and it is very, very virulent. Okay, in most companies, you have this style of sort of leadership. So if you are experiencing this kind of toxic leadership or toxic experience at the work, it's more, unfortunately, it's more normal than it isn't. Okay, and one's going to need to learn as best to deal with it, because I don't think that by moving jobs, it's going to be that much different, especially as you move towards the executive level.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I need also I just want to say that if you're in a bullying situation or you're being shamed by your peers, okay, you need to get out. You can't live a life like that. It'll just be, it'll destroy you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your time, Clive. This has been an eye opener and another way of looking at things. I mean, we always thought that a toxic work environment was on the ground, in the office space where everyone is. But now that you mentioned it starts from the top, from the leadership. Well, yeah, definitely an eye opener. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you. Cheers.
Bye bye. Clive Kaplin, an executive leadership coach, as well as the CEO of Green Mind Capital. If you would like some more information, you can go to their website, coach.greenmindcapital.co.za. And you can also send a WhatsApp message to 072 2806878, and Clive can come to your company and assist you and your employees, especially if you are going through what we have just discussed, and that is working in a toxic environment. How do you manage employees who are toxic? How do you manage employers who are toxic, or rather, how do you work your way around toxic environment? And if you are being bullied, the best way for you is to leave that situation. Um, it might be difficult. You might be thinking about your situation at home, but you're not going to be productive if you are being bullied, if you are being shamed, if you are being ridiculed, if you are being teased. That, because all of your attention is no longer on your work, but it's on trying to avoid that situation, trying to avoid being bullied or whatever the case is. So rather find a solution to that. All right, guys, it is 12:58. If you have any further comments, questions, queries, or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section, or send them to us on WhatsApp 061 7660355. But we have come to the end of the broadcast for today. Join me same time, same place, 11 to 1 p.m. right here on Salam Media. And if you need any other contact details or any other information, the interview will be available on Facebook. In fact, it is available right now for streaming on Facebook. And so are any other interviews that you've missed out for today. But for now, let me love and leave you, and have a wonderful day from myself, Mara Mokwanda, and the rest of the Salam Media team. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.